This week's edition of our Four Questions Journalist Spotlight is brought to you by Leff Atlanta Media, Atlanta's best journalist database. Subscribe at leffsatlantamedia.com. Welcome to the next episode, the next edition of our Four Questions Journalist Spotlight. We're talking today, if I can get my voice, with Stone Payton, who is with Business Radio X here in Georgia. Good morning, Stone.
Good morning, sir. Thanks for having me on the show, man.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we were talking a few weeks ago, and I thought, I know what you guys do, but I think it's if it's a mystery to other folks, then I want to pull the curtain on the mystery of what Business Radio X is, and let lots of folks know what it's all about. And then, as I warned you, I'm going to ask you what the coolest thing about you is a little bit later. So, kind of keep that in the back of your head. And if you need to, if you need to do a lifeline to someone else and say, what's cool about me, then, now's the time to do that. All right. So let's start out with what is Business Radio X? How do you describe it to folks?
So I typically will try to articulate it as a pro-business platform. Our mission is to amplify the voice of business. We're earned media. We never, ever charge guests to appear on any Business Radio X show across all 61 markets, in every studio, in every virtual interview. No one ever pays a fee to be interviewed. We want to support and celebrate those people that are out there just doing good work for their market, their community, and their profession. So that is the mission that drives us. Now, we do have a business model behind and under all of that. And so we are able to help other people meet their market and build relationships with the folks that are most important to them. So we have an entire methodology and 21 years of track record and pretty well baked recipe for getting that done. But that's what we get up and do every day, is try to share the stories of business.
Yeah, and I should say we worked together a couple of years ago with one of our clients who wanted to do kind of their own show. And so they worked with you guys to create a show, and they did a year's worth of episodes. And that was different. That was a paid show that they paid for. But it was a great opportunity for them to own their own show, be their own hosts. But that's kind of a separate bucket from, as you said, the earned media part of it, where you don't charge folks to be on the show. So how long has Business Radio X been in existence?
Well, Mitch, when I started with Lee Cantor, who's my business partner in this venture, I was 6'2" and had black hair. So you can tell we've been at it a while.
But you're telling me you're not 6'2" anymore?
No. I'm 5'0" in my best boots. I think this past August of 2024 marked our 21st year. And so we were kind of doing this type of digital radio, podcasty type stuff before it was cool. And it's interesting. Back then, we often had to explain what it was. And so the challenges, like in any business, they evolve and they change. We've gone from back then trying to explain to people what it was and how you could leverage it to grow your business and build real relationships real fast, to now we spend more of our time having conversations about why this is a little different than your nephew's podcast. This is different conversations, but
right.
21 years, I think, is your answer.
Okay. And this is a national network, right? You've got Business Radio X around the country. Is that correct?
We do. We're in 61 markets as of this conversation in some fashion. We have 19 physical studios, and I wear that hat too. I'm talking to you right now from Woodstock, Georgia, a suburb of Atlanta, and I'm actually at the house right now. But a mile down the road is the Cherokee Business Radio studio. Cherokee is the county here, and so yeah, we have 19 physical studios, and then we have quite a few operations where it's kind of more of a mobile flex hybrid, where a studio partner, that's what we call these people who run these community studios around the country, where they may go into a co-working space or a friend's conference room or whatever, or a client's conference room, and do some face-to-face kind of in-studio work. And they may do, we do, ever since COVID, Mitch, we kind of leaned into the Zoom too, because there's a lot you can do on this platform, as you well know.
Right,
But
right,
we're
right.
all over the country, and my day job, Mitch, is finding more people around the country to team up with us to serve these folks. So if you've got a cousin in a market we're not in, I'd love to hear about it.
Right. I do have some cousins in different places. So how many studios do you have in Georgia?
That's a great question, and I should know the answer to that as a managing partner, and I don't. But let me
Okay,
think.
count on your fingers. There you go.
All right, so we got North Fulton, we've got North Georgia, we've got Northeast Georgia, we've got Rome, Atlanta, Woodstock, Cumming. Is that seven?
Gwinnett.
Seven
So
or
do we
eight?
say do you have one in Gwinnett too?
Oh yes. Oh yes. Oh gosh, Mike. I'm sorry. Mike was the first guy. Mike Salmon. Oh man. And this guy came from terrestrial radio, which in our world is usually a big yellow flag. Because you have to untrain them more than you have to train them. But Mike Salmon, this guy, he is incredible. He was the first guy that we put out into the wild when Lee and I wanted to try to replicate what we were doing in the Atlanta studio. And I mean, he has just been such a force for good in that community, wildly successful. I'm sure he makes a comfortable living, but he should, because he is genuinely serving that community, man.
And I'm gonna do a little post production. I'm looking at the map of where you got your studios, and it's a good map of it looks like kind of eastern part of the country more than western part of the country, which is
Well, that's because
that's
our
all right.
number two guy that's responsible for expanding it, we need to replace him because he's just not up to snuff. If
You,
our number two guy in the firm was better, we'd have more out west. But
you,
we're going to try to light a fire under him.
you're saying you need somebody based in Seattle to do that Pacific Northwest part of the country and then West Coast a little bit more?
Well, we just need somebody with a better work ethic and better skills than the guy that's doing it right now.
Good help is hard to find, right?
Right.
Um, and it looks like, let's see, because you got one is there one down in Macon? Is that the,
Don't have one in Macon yet, but we're in Chattanooga, Pensacola,
okay,
Tallahassee, Houston. We're getting there, man.
okay,
It's just
good.
going
All right.
slow, especially during hunting season.
How does the earned media part of that work? If someone, are there different shows? Are there different topics? How does someone kind of make that connection and say, okay, I got a client or an expert that I think would be good for one of your shows?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. And again, look, I got lots of ways for you to write me a check, but you can't write a check to be on a show. What you want to do if you want to be on a show is you reach out to either Business Radio X Network, to corporate. There's plenty of contact points for that to just ask us at that level. But you can also reach out to your local Business Radio X studio partner and kind of pitch your idea for a story, and they'll get back to you. And most of our studio partners follow our kind of methodology of setting up a pre-call to just have a brief conversation. We have so many media properties, Mitch. I think probably 250, 260 separate media properties. So like if you were to reach out or one of your clients were to reach out, I'm not just putting them on the show. I want to have a conversation with them and get the right frame for their interview so that I want to make sure it's going to be good programming for us. And if it comes from Mitch Leff, it always is. But even then, I want to make sure that we're creating something and have the right frame for it so that that person is going to get plenty of utility out of the live broadcast, which we typically will do, but also on their ability to repurpose that conversation. So just reach out. We'll set them up with a booking link. They'll go there. They'll fill out a form. They can upload their headshot and logo and all that stuff. But the most important part of that piece, Mitch, is there will be a place there for them to share a handful of topics or questions that they would like us to tee up and fold into the conversation, because we want to make sure that they get every bit as much utility, if not more so, than we do out of capturing that conversation.
Yeah, so in most cases, you're going to want they're going to go to a physical studio and sit down in across from the host and do the interview that way. But then you've got some, I guess I think the Rome, Georgia, you said is more virtual setup, right?
Well, that's my fault, but yeah, we're actually actively recruiting a studio partner in Rome, Georgia.
Yeah.
And so, but right now, if you were to book a Rome, Georgia interview for whatever reason, if that was the right frame for you, then we would still publish under that media property, but we would do it virtually. We'd do it on a Zoom.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting. Over the last 4 years, everybody's gotten used to doing these Zoom interviews, but there's a certain something to being in the same room with your host and having that physical interaction across the table with someone. It's just a little something, and you get there a few minutes before the interview. You do a little pre-conversation. You get the if you're in a I've done some with some of your folks where I've been like be like two or three guests on a certain topic, so you get to meet other people before and after. So there's something to that, right? To that
Oh my
personal
goodness. I'll give you a
interaction.
very recent example. Just yesterday morning, one of our flagship clients here locally is Kennesaw State University's executive MBA program. So we had two alumni and the guy that was not an alumni but was very familiar with KSU's work all from Home Depot. And it was like a special episode. But one guy didn't know the other two. We also had the guy who runs that program, Tom Devaney, in there. And just exactly what you're describing. They learned things about each other they didn't know, even though they all work at Home Depot. And the two that had not connected with the other guy, I mean, it's amazing. Of course, you have a marvelous experience in the studio. You learn about each other. You get to share your story, promote your work. But it was the 30 minutes after the show, Mitch, when we had a great opportunity, great time, and they didn't want to leave. I mean, we hung out for like 30 minutes, and they
Right,
were
right.
making all kind of connections, and that happens day in, day out, every time. Yeah, it's a different dynamic. You can get a lot done. You can help people and make money doing with the virtual interview, but man, there's just no replacing that in studio experience.
Yeah. And the nice thing is once you do the segment, then I get the link and I can do whatever I want with it to put it on my digital platforms or social media, whatever I want to do to kind of amplify your amplification, as we say, right?
Oh, absolutely. And we're learning more and more every day, and it's apparently getting easier. I mean, I'm not doing it. I'm still writing a check for it. But once you capture a really well facilitated, authentic conversation, and you're in our model, we're staying in that person's wheelhouse, right? So it's really good stuff. Once you capture that, there's just so many ways to leverage and repurpose that content for internal messaging, external messaging. You can send a little 30, 60, 90-second clip that really hits on one point, and then you can have them. And then when you click on that, you go to something else that you're talking about. There's just no end to the way you can leverage. And I mean, we're a content factory, man. You sit down and have a conversation with somebody. Imagine if I came to you and I said, "Hey, Mitch, how about writing me a white paper about the PR business?" What a headache. But you and I can get on a Zoom and definitely in studio. We'll get so much more content so much quicker, and it's more authentic. It's better. Yeah, lots of ways to repurpose it, man.
Yeah, and that's what I always tell folks. And as with anything, any media story, it's great. You get the initial hit in the Atlanta Business Chronicle or the Daily News or whatever, but then you have the opportunity to take that and focus that to your audiences, your prospects. Put it on your LinkedIn pages, put it on your Facebook and Twitter or whatever you want to do to kind of get some extra, bang for that interview. And if you do a 10-minute interview with you, as you said, you can kind of pull sound bites
Well,
out of that and do a little something else with it.
at the risk of sounding a little bit immodest, having a business Radio X interview under your belt does have some gravity because we do have that brand equity. So if you want to go out and court interviews with other people or other types of media, it helps in that regard as well. So our experience has been over the last 21 years, everybody wins in this equation. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So Stone, how did you get into this business? I mean, do you have a radio background? What brought you to this place, this chair where you are now?
Oh gosh, no. I grew up in the training and consulting world, and I got my first job in the training and consulting world the old-fashioned way, Mitch. My uncle owned the company, and and I didn't get hired to do design and delivery work and client-facing work. I was hired to work in the basement, and it was my job to make sure that page 12 came between 11 and 13 in those 3-ring binders that was shipped to the client. But I really did have kind of a knack for it. I earned some badges. I kind of grew up in that firm. It was a change management consulting firm. And so I took off pretty quickly, made more money than a lot of folks make at that age. And then after my uncle fired me, I had to go out on my own. And then I worked for a couple of other training consulting firms, kind of gravitated toward the sales side. After the last one of those firms, and I've been hired and fired from some of the most prestigious change management consulting firms on the planet.
That's good to have those on your resume, right?
After the last one fired me, I went out on my own and was doing keynote work, and I self-published a book. And I don't know how you'd be about it, man, but I would have talked to the high school newspaper about the book if they'd hear me out. So I made the rounds on all these traditional radio shows, kind of the Saturday afternoon, I'm a smart CPA radio show, and I did a bunch of those, and they were fun. The exchange was a fair energy exchange, but those shows were much more like host centric, a little more superficial. You broke for commercial and all. And then I got invited to this little show called Atlanta Business Radio by Amy Otto. She co-hosted it with Lee Cantor. And I went in there, and I mean, the clouds parted, the doves flew, the angels sang. It was a completely different experience. We had a real conversation about me and the work, the why behind the work, where I was taking it. And I was so enamored with that there was two other business people in that show too. And we had a cohesive show, but we each had our own segment. But Mitch, I couldn't figure out how the guy was making money, because he didn't charge me to be on the show. He didn't run any commercials. I left after the other guests left. I sat down. I said, "Man, this is great. Thank you. How are you making money?" And so he explained to me the business model. And so I wrote a check, and I became a client. That's where the High Velocity Radio Show started. Bitch, it wasn't 90 days later. I wrote a bigger check and bought 40% of the company. And I haven't. That's the rest is history, man. I've been riding his coattails ever since.
So let's talk about it for a second. So the making money part of it, is it through that other side, the studio, the people who say, I want to own my own studio, I want to do my own show. Is that the money side of it? Is that where the revenue stream is?
That's the core revenue stream, and it was day one, and it is now. Now we counted just a little over 24 revenue streams, ways to make money as a studio partner, someone who runs a studio. But all of us who have studios, our core revenue stream is we all have a handful of clients in the professional services B2B world. They don't need, another 1,000 Facebook buddies. What they need is a dozen more real relationships, and that'll really move the needle in their business. So we help them custom craft a show to serve their ecosystem and put them in real relationship, real fast, with the people who are important to them, their most coveted prospects, their most trusted referral sources, the professional organizations that are around that particular ecosystem. We make them the darling of that arena. And as a result, we're able to provide at least 2x. We won't work with them if we don't feel like we can give them a 100% ROI. So 2x on their money. But 4 and 5x is more common, and 8 and 10 is not heard of. And so they write us, and most of us run it on a subscription model, and they're happy to write that check because we're delivering serious ROI. And then there's 24 other revenue streams, but that's why I can pay the rent and go play some too.
That's good. Yeah. And I know the client that we'd worked on that had their own show, they were bringing in some of their current clients, but also a lot of prospective clients. So for a company, if you want to, it's a great opportunity to bring in a prospective client and say, hey, I'm going to give you some exposure. We're going to talk about your business on my podcast, and then the theory is that prospective client says, wow, these guys are sharp. They know what they're talking about. I need an accounting firm. I need the PR firm. I need the law firm, whatever the services that the host, that the company does, like, right?
You say, hey, you've been on my show, so now buy my stuff.
Yeah. But with any kind of marketing, we would say you're touching people multiple times, right? So someone sees, they're on Business Radio X, and then they're on the radio. Then they see them at a conference, and they see they hear a radio spot. So and then when they get to purchase point where they say, okay, I'm ready to engage with a new PR firm. Like, okay, I've been seeing this Mitch Leff guy 4 or 5 different places. I'm gonna he's top of mind. I'm gonna go talk to him.
Well, there's
And yeah,
that happens a lot. But I'll tell you, when you've done that and you've given that gift, and you haven't made it about you, you've made it about them. Let me tell you something. Every guest that comes through my studio or anybody else's, number one, they will take your call. If I got out of the radio business and sold office furniture and called one of my guests, they first of all, they're going to take my call. They would seriously entertain a conversation about my products and services and genuinely listen. And, if I call Bob, and Bob's brother-in-law sells office furniture, so he's going to get divorced if he buys from me, right? So that he can't buy from me. Bob is still going to help me any way he can. He'll refer me to a dozen other people because he wishes he could help me. So yeah, there's the top of mind and the exposure, but man, the foundation for relationship that you create when you serve first, you serve early, you serve often, and you help these people in this way, give them a chance to share their story and promote their work. It's just, it works like, in my personal opinion, the Creator Minute too.
yeah, that's great. All right, so are there topics that you're looking at, say for the next month or 2 or 3, that you say, okay, I want people to talk about these topics, be it, the holiday gift season or the economy or stock market or how to have work-life balance, or other topics that you're looking at that you think, hey, I'd love to have somebody on the shows with these issues on these topics.
Absolutely. And of course, it varies from studio to studio and from media property to media property. But just as an example, for my house show, Cherokee Business Radio, I am first and foremost, our ethos, our value system, our methodology is rule number one. I want to talk about what the guest wants to talk about. But the answer to your question, I personally would love to have some folks come in and talk about financial literacy. I'd love to have some folks come in and talk about healthcare. I'd love to have some folks come in and talk about how do you scale that business. You got a guy making 100 and a quarter, 200 grand a year, but he or she really wants to scale that business. I would love to get some folks in there that have specific experience and maybe even expertise in that domain. Now, I'll entertain conversations on other topics, but I personally, if one of those pops up, we get a lot of inbound inquiries at this point. If one of them pops up like that, they're going to the top of the pile because I want that programming out of my studio.
Okay, good. And obviously, and I'm hearing, and my experience with you guys is it's kind of news you can use, segments and experts that someone listens to and thinks, okay, I learned something from that. It's something I can take away, something I can help. It's something that's going to improve my business, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into the hard questions now. Those are the easy questions. So the hard question is, what is the coolest thing about Stone Payton that people might not know about?
So if you'd asked me this last week, I would say my name. I have always enjoyed having my name. It's unique. There's not a lot of us. When I spent a brief period of time on the other side of the Mason-Dixon, when I took a sales territory for one of those firms that fired me that I mentioned, they took it as a Southern name. And the minute they heard my accent, I was able to leverage it in so many ways. So I've always loved my name. But as of today, and I learned this last 2 weeks ago, I am going to be a grandpa. So
awesome. Congrats.
My mind, that is the coolest thing. And we know it's going to be a boy. I'm already working on the lifetime hunting license. So for me, that might not be what other people say, but I think that's the coolest thing going on in my world right now.
That's great. All right. So these next couple are just quick answers. You don't have to go too deep, but okay. Last book you've read or the last podcast you've listened to, and the podcast can't be one of yours.
So I read and reread every year The Richest Man in Babylon. And that is a book about financial literacy and disciplines and staying out of debt. And I also read and reread every year Think and Grow Rich. So and I learn something every time. And all the podcasts that I listen to outside of our work is all around hunting and fishing and travel.
Okay. Favorite local restaurant?
Oh, wow. I live in downtown Woodstock, so they're all great. But the one that surfaces, and it's my first lily pad. And they also have a great bar and bartender, but Ips. It's an Italian restaurant right here on Main Street in Woodstock. If I have to pick one, it's Ips.
Well, I'm sorry, what's it called?
Ips. It's Ippolito's,
Ips.
but they
Okay.
Ips up here.
All right. All right. Favorite guilty pleasure.
Oh my. I guess it would qualify. In fact, today, this afternoon, I am headed down to the cigar bar where I have a locker, and we will sip some bourbon. I do a lot of business over a glass of bourbon, so
Yeah.
I guess bourbon and cigars.
All right. Um, Local getaway places, somewhere you'd like to go to get away from it all.
Yeah, I think it's Wildlife Action. I'm on the board at an organization called Wildlife Action of Georgia. It's 15 minutes from here. It's right on Lake Allatoona on Kellogg Creek. Our mission is to introduce kids and to help disabled people and people who don't get out and get to do much outdoor stuff, introduce them to hunting, fishing, outdoors, boating, hiking, camping. And I can hop in the truck and be there in 15 minutes. And every chance I get, I'll go up there and just walk around the woods. And to me, it's almost like my church, man. I love being in the woods or on the water.
All right. And you may have answered this question, but favorite non-work hobby sounds like it's walking in the woods.
Yeah, and it depends on time of year. Right now it's hunting because it's hunting season. I also like to fish, walking in the woods. That is it. That's it.
Very good. We have been talking with Stone Payton with Business Radio X. Thank you, Stone. Awesome conversation. Um, and as always, if you want to get to our library of episodes and podcasts, go to Four Questions Journalist Spotlight on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. It's all over the place. And if you are looking for our database of Atlanta media, go to Leff's. There's behind me. Go to leffsandatlantamedia.com, and you can always find us on Leff and Associates at leffassociates.com. Stone, thank you so much. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure, man. This has been a blast.
Very good. Thanks, everybody.